Is there anything you would have done differently?
We reported a true story.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq.
Controversial Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and questions about Kavanaugh's drinking in the past.
Sean Hannity, come on up, Sean Hannity.
Today, Andrew Cuomo is having a moment.
Hi, I'm Chris Steyerwalt.
And I'm Eliana Johnson.
Welcome to Insane Wretches, where we break down what's going wrong and what's going right with the American news media. And Eliana Johnson, one of the things that I complain often about on this podcast is the geographic bias of the news and how things that happen in New York and Washington, because most of the news media is in New York and Washington, gets outsized coverage. But I have to talk about, and I do think it is larger in scope. More than 6 people killed in a plane crash going into Reagan, a flight that I have taken in my life, coming in from Wichita, Kansas. And when I saw the news, which we saw in almost real time, video was available from the stationary camera on top of the Kennedy Center, just upriver from the airport. And I thought about the families of those people who were expecting someone coming home or somebody who was going on a work trip. And I thought about how I consider my life to be a very low risk life and congratulate myself, especially given my misspent youth, on living a very low risk life. And I thought, well, maybe that's not true. And I just thought about my sons and my pony and everybody and how I do have to take care of myself, and I do have to think about those things for them because I would never want to put them through that.
It's really awful. And actually, my window in here backs to the Potomac, where you can see, if you look really hard, the crew is out on the water dealing with this. So it's a total tragedy. But as we record this on Thursday morning, we still don't know very much about the causes, which is why we should say we're not getting into that. All we know is that this awful collision between a civilian passenger plane that flew out of Kansas and an Army helicopter with, I believe, 4 people on it.
3 or 4 people, yeah.
Collided as the airplane was landing at Reagan Airport.
Yeah, life is short. Life is short.
So what we do know about, and just as we record this, the Kash Patel hearing for FBI director and the Tulsi Gabbard hearing for the director of national intelligence are unfolding. So we're not going to talk about them because we are not watching them in real time since we are doing this. But we will talk about all the other developments in the Trump administration and how they were covered over the past week, starting with this freeze in federal funding. I had a suspicion, Chris, that something happened here because most of the executive orders that have come out from the White House have been pretty carefully done. And this one, which asked for a report within 60 days from the various agencies, the various agencies asked for reports from their folks to review discretionary federal funding to ensure that it aligns with the administration's priorities and values. It caused a lot of confusion about what applied to it and what didn't. And I just had a sense that something had gone amiss. And the Atlantic now reports that a memo from the Office of Management and Budget that attempted to explain what funding applied and what didn't apply to this, i.e., what funding was frozen for at least the next 60 days and what wasn't reviewed by the White House. Now, we don't know if this is White House spin or not, but the Atlantic reports that President Donald Trump intended his flood of executive orders to shock and awe his opponents, but on Monday night, a memo from the Office of Management and Budget instead shocked the Trump White House. Good lead. That memo, with its call for a temporary pause on all federal government grants and loans, and I believe the pause was on discretionary spending, set off widespread panic and confusion within the federal government and among the millions of individuals and institutions reliant on federal funds. But it was released without going through the usual White House approval processes. The memo was produced by the Budget Office alone, which failed to get proper sign-off from the White House, according to a senior White House official and a second person familiar with the memo. The team headed by Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Stephen Miller, had requested to see the memo before it went out, but OMB never sent it over, these people said.
And when asked about it, the White House press secretary said that they're rescinding, it's a rescission of the memo, not the policy. Okay, well, what's the policy? Well, it was in the memo. Okay. And a judge blocked, said, well, you're not doing anything until we find out what this is. And the thing about shock and awe is you can hide a lot in shock and awe, right? You can overwhelm basically the defenses of the media and official Washington and the political class because there's so much going on that what people are looking at and is getting all the attention, other things are moving forward because basically the circuits get overloaded. And the problem is that the people on whom the administration's agenda rests are the members of Congress. Executive orders, as we already see on birthright citizenship and on a lot of things, you cannot govern through pen and phone alone. So they need Congress. And while the administration is asking Congress to swallow some pretty bitter pills, you mentioned Kash Patel, but there's also Tulsi Gabbard, they voted in Pete Hegseth. All of these things come at a cost, right? They were confirmation votes cast to avoid a cost, right? I don't know if you saw, I should have included it, the Wall Street Journal piece on how it said that Tom Tillis, senator from North Carolina, had induced Pete Hegseth's former sister-in-law.
I did see that, and I understand there was a whole. Sorry, finish what you were going to say.
No, tell me more. I want to know.
So sorry to interrupt you, but there was a Wall Street Journal story about the fact that North Carolina Senator Republican Tom Tillis had made assurances to Pete Hegseth's former sister-in-law that a sworn statement she provided to the Senate Armed Services Committee, which oversaw his confirmation, would make a difference in the hearing. And then he wound up, he was the final holdout vote he was the make or break vote on the confirmation because 3 other Republican senators voted no. And my understanding is that there was a whole lot of wrangling on the day of the vote, which took place last Friday in the evening, to secure his vote. So, it is what it is, but
So Tillis is a really good example. Tillis is balancing. He's running for re-election in a state that is a swing state. North Carolina has a Democratic governor. Democrats did very well in everything except for the presidential election in 2024. And the Republican Party in North Carolina is a basket case, as evidenced by their nomination of Mark Robinson to be their gubernatorial nominee. And so Tillis first has to run in the primary where he will assuredly be primaried. But then he has to run in the general. So you want to vote for people like Hegseth. You want to vote for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You want to vote for those folks to try to get through the primary. But then you got to turn right around and talk to the general electorate. And by November of this year or of next year, you'll be living with the consequences of what these people do in office. And these are really tough. So while you're trying to get your slate of very controversial nominees through, do you want for the senators who are casting judgment, do you want for the members of the House that have to agree on a reconciliation spending and tax package, do you want them to have their political lives exploded by the fact that every research institution in the country says, wait a minute, are all of our grants being frozen? Is the funding to study Alzheimer's frozen? Is the funding for what's happening? And so they all get blown up over it. And the answer is well, we were just trying to scare people. We didn't mean for it to be true. And it was, to me, a very good example about why shock and awe misunderstands the fact that we are, in political terms, several geological eras away from a midterm election that will be very, very consequential for this agenda.
Well, I also think the problem here was the lack of clarity. They intended that for this to be a political win in that they were saying we're going to review all these woke programs, and it would have been nice to, I think, in the messaging, if there had been some examples at hand of things that were going to get real scrutiny. But that didn't happen because it was overtaken by all of the confusion around it. And I would say, the media was just a handmaiden to the federal government employees who were freaking out.
Well, it's a very similar story with the firing of the Department of Justice, the folks who worked on the Jack Smith's team of prosecutors. So the item, Trump DOJ appointee in DC lashes out after a flurry of personally insulting leaks in his first week. And so he sends out this memo, and his memo, he's the interim in the U.S. Attorney's. Is it U.S. Attorney's office?
Yeah, in DC.
In the DC U.S. Attorney's office. And so he's the interim, and he sends out this memo, which, much like the memo on on freezing the grants, reads like it's from the desk of Hugo Chavez, right? It says too much. It's the prose is florid. It's over the top, and it got leaked. And then his memo, the in which he expressed the personal insult that he felt at the leak, got what? Leaked. Of course it got leaked. And this is I was put in mind. Do you remember when Trump fired James Comey, but he didn't want to go through the normal channels because he knew that his people would try to stop him from doing it in a hasty, rash manner, which did end up having Robert Mueller appointed and caused a lot of trouble for the administration. So he did a back channel thing and had his body man take it down to the FBI.
Comey was traveling, I think.
Had his body man take it down to the FBI.
Yeah.
Gets the FBI. They're like, he's not here. And well, is he fired yet or not fired yet? And then we got to have a OJ helicopter chase of Comey going to the airport so he could come back to Washington to be fired. And you got to be good at this stuff, right? If you want to fundamentally transform America, you better be real good at this stuff, because things that aren't, and I don't want to say that it's not important that they fired people who worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, because some of them are career staff and it'll be litigated. They'll go back and forth, be a whole thing. And there's a broader story here about trying to expand executive power and a really sort of grandiose idea about what executive power is. So there are real issues here, but the firing of those folks is not central to any important political project, or any political project that is important to the persuadable voters who gave Donald Trump back the presidency.
I'm not sure I totally agree with that. I think it was an obvious move for him to remove people who tried to put him in jail. It's sort of clear those people can't be trusted to execute his agenda. And Trump did actually run on reforming the civil service, which this is not doing. I mean, he's just firing people, but I do think that if he is to follow through on actually reforming the civil service, which, we know based on where the voting patterns of the zip codes in which these people live, and from knowing many civil servants, they're 80 to 90% Democrats. I think that would be quite popular, actually. I don't think that the job protections that these people have are popular with the American people. And Trump is doing that by pointing out, come back to the office or you're getting fired. And I think stuff like that is people think is reasonable.
I think that what Trump wants to do, and this is also of a piece with Pete Hegseth taking down Mark Milley's picture at the Pentagon and other stuff, is backward looking, and if you want to get rid of the people who work at the Justice Department who were on the case, you don't need to send out a memo. You don't need to do any of that stuff. You methodically root them out, as other administrations do. You shunt them off into some less important job. You squeeze them, they quit, whatever. Compare it to what the administration just did on offering basically buyouts to federal workers who don't want to return to the office. Hey, quit now, we'll pay you through the end of the federal fiscal year and you don't have to work. And that's a innovative approach, right? You want to do that, you're offering them something, you're offering them a trade, you're doing it in a way that decreases conflict. The point of what Hegseth did at the Pentagon, the point of these firings in a very public way with a memo, the point of the ill-conceived and poorly executed funding freeze is about the vengeance, right? It's about making a show of hurting other people. That doesn't help you get the agenda through. If prices do not go down, and so Trump is doing very well on, he has two big things that he needs to accomplish for his administration to be considered successful. Number one, immigration. And so far, the execution of those priorities seems to be going well. The Department of Homeland Security seemed ready. The raids continue apace. It seems like, and public opinion is broadly aligned with that. And then the other one is prices. And inflation and immigration, it seems very clear. We got a lot of public opinion research on this. Punishing your political enemies is not on that list. And the political capital that they expend doing those things harms, it's a Mickey Mouse balloon. You squeeze this ear, the other ear gets bigger. You want to do this stuff and do it in a grandiose way, it's going to cost you someplace else. And I just don't think that given the margins in Congress, they have the room to indulge anything other than basically those top two priorities.
It is amusing, by the way, the media reaction to a lot of these things is Trump doesn't have the power to do that. He doesn't have the power to do that. It's against the law. Whereas I don't recall any of those reactions when Biden took many actions that stretched the bounds of his authority, such as student loans. I don't remember the articles before the Supreme Court ruled against him.
Certainly the tone was very different. It was like,
I don't remember the freak out.
Yeah, the tone was very different. I wonder if this unconstitutional action will stand up. And then it's like, well, what can you do? And the bipartisan assault on the constitutional order not only continued apace under Joe Biden, but intensified. And now we have Trump with the fresh, most brazen attack on it so far since FDR. And the coverage now is about freak out. Oh my gosh. And under Biden, it was like, interesting questions arise. Can he really forgive student loan debt? Can he really forbid people from evicting squatters? It's different.
Well, Vice President J.D. Vance.
Oh, yeah.
His maiden interview as vice president. He did a lot on the campaign trail with CBS News' Margaret Brennan. Interesting to note that while the campaign went to alternative media sources quite a bit, he did his first interview with in a very traditional venue, and he did well.
She did poorly.
And should we play a few clips from this?
Let's hear it.
And now that we know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
These people are vetted.
Good.
These people are vetted.
Just like the guy who planned a terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted, and many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted, and because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
Well, this is a country founded by immigrants.
Well, this is a country
This is a
founded
unique
by
country.
This is a very unique country, and it was founded by some immigrants and some settlers. But just because we were founded by immigrants doesn't mean that 240 years later that we have to have the dumbest immigration policy in the world.
All right. Chris, what makes you say she did poorly as opposed to he did well?
Oh no, he did fine. He's good at that. He's definitely good at that stuff. And what he did best was provoke her into losing her cool, right? She seemed genuinely upset as opposed to journalistic remove, right? It was not a cool line of inquiry. It was hot confrontation. And it does not, as a person who has to interview people, I could do better at being more confrontational, but I am very leery of confrontational kinds of interviews because they're not going, especially when you're talking to JD Vance. What's he going to do? Is he going to go, you're right, I'm a jerk. Now is the moment that I'm going to level with you. I'm a phony and a jerk, and you've done it. I don't think that happens in interviews. And I think that those kinds of interviews serve the interests of both because they provide content and they provide attention and heat, but they do not shed much light.
The question she asked as a follow-up when he made the point about the lack of vetting of Afghan refugees who came into the country and pointed to the man in Oklahoma who was arrested for plotting a terrorist attack. And she butted in to say, well, that was a really specific case because we don't know if he was actually radicalized when he was in this country or in Afghanistan. It was amazing to me because, how many people would actually be persuaded? Let's say he did come here and was radicalized. Like, how many people are going to be persuaded that this is someone who should have been allowed in the country?
Yeah, it was.
The point is just, it's incredible to me, like these lines of argument.
You don't need to, if you're interviewing somebody, you don't need to be right. You don't need to be right because it's not about you. But it was a difficult, if the vice president agrees to come on your show, you're in a difficult position because you have to make him accountable. And he is a very hard person to make accountable. He's very smart. He is a very agile arguer. And but you don't want to give him a pass. I don't pretend that I would have done better, but the effect was poor.
Chris, you flagged this piece from the Atlantic. America is divided. It makes for tremendous content.
So this is fascinating to me. It's about something called Jubilee Media. And it does, here's the lead. Amid the madness and tension of the most recent presidential election campaign, a wild form of clickbait video started flying around the political internet. The titles describe debates with preposterous numerical twists, such as, can one woke teen survive 20 Trump supporters? And 60 Republicans versus Democrats debate the 2024 election. Fiery tidbits went viral. A trans man yelling at the conservative pundit Ben Shapiro for a full 4 minutes. Pete Buttigieg trying to calm an undecided voter seething with rage at Democrats. These weren't typical TV news shouting matches with commentators in suits mugging to cameras. People were staring into each other's eyes, speaking spontaneously, litigating national divisions in a manner that looked like a support group and felt like the Jerry Springer Show. And this is a more intense version. It doesn't look like what you see on TV, on bad TV, but it is an extension, a logical extension. It's the monster truck rally version of what you do see on TV, which is performative argumentation. And I have a long held belief that no one wins an argument. You might persuade an audience, maybe, but not really. When you're arguing for an audience, it's performative. And what you're going to do is make people more entrenched in their views, not less entrenched. Does one suppose that the one woke teen came away from his or her encounter with 20 Trump supporters more open to the ideas of Donald Trump? I doubt it. I doubt that. And this idea of this is the thing that I so want us to move away from, but I know we won't, that I so want us to move away from, which is the gladiatorial spectacle of political discourse. It's rots your brain and it's bad news.
Well, I had never heard of this, so maybe your wish is succeeding.
Well, you float above such phrase.
Anybody who knows my love for reality TV and, Instagram handbag reviews would disagree with that.
I think that's harmless fluff mostly, right? The fighting over who brought the Prosecco to a Real Housewives gathering doesn't do violence to our ability to govern ourselves. I think that it's sort of like, I think for a female audience or a predominantly female audience, I think that's like sports is for men. It's just, it's a good place to park your animal passions.
Chris, that brings us to the business news. And what else could we discuss but Jim Acosta's resignation from CNN because he did not want to be demoted from his 10 a.m. slot on the network to a 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. slot, which was, they tried to put lipstick on that pig and tell him he would be prime time on the West Coast. But he is taking his wares to Substack for now, apparently knocking on the door of MSNBC, which reportedly has not returned his interest. And he signed off by telling his listeners not to let tyranny and lies win. What do you make of it, Chris?
I mean, I wouldn't want to work midnight to 2 a.m. either. I get it.
Depends on for how much money, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a number. This, of course, is the Steyerwalt proviso. When I see people who have already gotten rich abase themselves to be on television or famous in the news business, I always think, I guess that's why I have not made a shocking amount of money, is because I would quit. I would stop. I don't think Jim Acosta's ever made that kind of money, but I promise you, you put $20 million in my pocket, you'll never have to hear from me ever again. I promise you, I will leave the world alone. I will anchor nothing. I will host nothing. I will Substack nothing. I promise.
Well, I think Acosta abased himself with his farewell.
Yeah,
we should play for everyone. Let's jump to it.
It is never a good time to bow down to a tyrant. I've always believed it's the job of the press to hold power to account. I've always tried to do that here at CNN, and I plan on doing all of that in the future. One final message. Don't give in to the lies. Don't give in to the fear. Hold on to the truth and to hope. Even if you have to get out your phone, record that message. I will not give in to the lies. I will not give in to the fear. Post it on your social media so people can hear from you too.
Really subtle, as usual. Hard to figure out where this alleged straight newsman stands on current events.
But if you, and this is the other side of the MAGA mayhem thing, which is, okay, if you create a permission structure that you can break all the rules and do whatever you want to do because the stakes are so high, when can you ever lower the stakes, and when can normal behavior ever be expected again? And Acosta had a very successful tenure, not for the interests of his viewers necessarily, but he had a very personally successful tenure as White House correspondent in the Trump administration, and it worked for him and it worked for Trump, right? We hate you, Jim Acosta, says MAGA, and resistance enthusiasts say Jim Acosta is brave standing up to Donald Trump. And we learn nothing. We don't find anything out, because if your question is, will you at long last admit that you're a bad person? That's not actually a tough question. That's a fake tough question. And, Jim Acosta's magnetic is the wrong word, but he has a real on-air persona, right? And if Jim Acosta was doing sports or any whatever, I no doubt would be successful in those things. But when your brand becomes one thing, how are you going to do anything else? So I get it.
So I recommend to everyone the Free Beacon's resident humorist, enormously talented Andrew Stiles mocked up a Jim Acosta resignation letter to Mark Thompson, and it will be linked in our newsletter. I highly recommend it.
No doubt.
It's fantastic reading. Chris, that brings us to our facile file, where we did not talk about President Trump's threat to impose a 25% tariff on Colombia, among other threats, when Colombia's president refused to let military planes carrying illegal Colombian migrants land in the country. And the Colombian president had reversed himself in under an hour and said, I'll send my presidential plane. Okay, actually, your planes can land. But that didn't stop a cascade of freakouts in the news media. Can you walk us through them?
Well, it was about, I don't know, it was less than a day, certainly, in which Trump, the president of Colombia, said, you will not treat our illegal immigrants like war criminals and ship them here on a military plane. I will not let them land. Well, if you don't let them land, we're going to put a 25% tariff on everything that you send. And then they negotiated it out and came up with a face-saving solution for both sides. Okay. The response, though, was it was interesting. The Axios piece is Trump's Colombia tariff threat raises fears on coffee prices. So they were ready. They were there. What do we do? And I have sympathy. You got news breaking and your whole thing is you're doing explanatory journalism. Well, what could we do? Well, what comes from Colombia? Coffee. Okay, write it up. It's very hard to keep up in this era. If you're in the Joe Biden presidency, you're having to tease out of a very slow moving train wreck stories to tell. And how do we do the next angle on this? You write this piece, somebody writes this piece at noon, by 4 p.m. it's obviated. So it's, I get it, but still pretty facile.
But what about flowers?
Yeah, I did not see this. What is this?
Hannah Navarro of The View tweeted, most of the flowers imported into the U.S. come from Colombia. Happy Valentine's Day, America.
How will this affect Hunter DeButz's plans for Valentine's Day?
It was hilarious because I just have a feeling if you put a poll to Americans, deport the illegal immigrants versus pay more for flowers, which it turns out isn't the choice put to them, I have a feeling I know how they would vote.
Well, here's what I know about the American voting public. They have a lot of beliefs, but they will pay absolutely no price for any of them. Care about global warming? Yes. Okay, well, it's going to cost more. Nope. Do you want to do? Yeah, we want all good things. All right, it's going to cost more? Absolutely not. No one told me that there would be a cost.
Well, flowers are not exactly an essential good.
Oh, au contraire. Are you kidding me? You're not getting it. I need to talk to Patrick. You should be getting more flowers.
I'm not a flower fan.
You're not a flower fan?
No.
Oh.
Chris, I'm a jewel shoe handbag fan.
You want more durable goods.
Yes. I don't want something that's going to come and die.
Well,
in my house.
I recommend very highly Nature Composed in Middleburg, Virginia, my florist of choice, and I love to get the pony flowers. It's good she's not a real horse or she'd just eat them, but I think flowers are wonderful. It's the impermanence of them enhances their beauty.
I'm not a fan. I do like fake flowers, I have to say.
Okay,
Those are nice.
There you go. So you just you're into permanence.
Yes, I like permanence. I do.
All right.
It does leave you with weird seasonal issues, so you have to swap them out, but you at least get a lot more time with them. All right, Chris, this is all you.
Oh, this is what the facile file was made for. Headline, Washington Post. Transgender soldiers date to the Civil War. Okay. The alternate headline could be history exists. What makes this so amazingly facile is no one who dressed as a man or presented themselves as a man to fight in the Civil War. And by the way, that doesn't just date to the Civil War. That dates to, I assume, the first army that ever existed. I assume that for 10,000 years, there have been women who dressed as men in order to fight in wars. Did not know what transgenderism was. And of course, what the piece only alludes to, but is so obvious, is they were not trying to be identified as transgender. They were, in fact, working very hard to not be identified as a person who was living as the other sex. And just, it made me laugh out loud. The willful, it met all of the definitions of being facile, because it was willfully ignorant of the truth, which is that it is the opposite, right? In the current case, the debate is over. People who want to, whether you agree with them or don't agree with them, loudly, proudly proclaim a new gender, a different gender than the one that they were given at birth. Okay, that's a separate debate. But that is totally different from a person, a young woman, who disguises herself as a man to enlist and serve in the military. Just as facile as you can get.
Chris, that brings us to our styles section.
Here we go.
And I saw this and thought it had your name all over it. Somebody wrote into the New York Times, David from Flushing, New York, wrote in to the New York Times and asked, sometime in the last few years, it became fashionable for men to wear brown shoes with blue or black pants. I thought there was a rule against this. How did the new trend start, and should it be stopped? Now, do you want to answer, or should I read the New York Times answer first?
Well, you can do anything that you want to do, right? You can wear a double-breasted suit with a bolo necktie and purple cowboy boots. You can do anything that you want. This is a free country, and you can dress as you wish. You can be whoever you want to be. And I will not love you more, or I will not love you less, however that is, because it's the content of your character and what's inside that counts. All that having been said, if you are trying to present yourself as a serious adult, brown shoes, especially light brown shoes, we've talked about this many times. Cordovan, yes. Oxblood, sure. Taking it to a dark brown, yes, you can do it. And it's even maybe a little sporty. But these guys, and they're out there, and I watched the Speaker of the House of Representatives do it. They wear light brown shoes with a business suit, and it looks ridiculous. And they wear light brown shoes with white crepe soles like sneakers. And it's like, what are you trying to say? What we wear is a message that we're sending to the world, right? It's not for us. It's for, this is what we're saying to people. This is how I want you to see me. And there's nothing more comfortable about wearing children's dress shoes, fake dress shoes, than a good pair of dress shoes. It's not a comfort question. It's a style question, and it looks childish and silly and preposterous. So when you you can wear brown shoes with gray. Yes, I wear brown shoes with gray, certainly. But blue wants black shoes. You can wear Oxblood or Cordovan, but your blue suit wants black shoes. That's what it wants, with a black belt or suspenders, not black suspenders. Though you could wear black suspenders if you wanted to.
All right, this is the Times verdict. I think dark brown shoes are totally fine with navy pants.
But
not black.
Not light brown shoes.
Yeah, I don't think light brown shoes. So the Times says, since the menswear shows are going on in Paris as I write, I thought I would ask our man on the scene, Jacob Gallagher, what he's seeing. A lot of what once would have been a wrong pairing, he responded. So that's what he's seeing all over the Paris runways, like black overcoats with blue chinos and brown shoes. These combos are now acceptable because they make you look twice, but they aren't really that garish.
Are you trying to get people to look, if you as a man dressing for business, a man of business, if your goal is to make people look twice, reassess your goal. Think about your goal. Your goal is that your clothes are not remarkable. And when I wear a bow tie, I understand it's a little bit of a statement piece or whatever goofy term. I get it. And I am guilty of it there. But basically what you would like with your clothes is for them to be unremarkable, except for when people are in your company to say, oh, he looks nice. That's good. He's well put together. But you don't want to present, this is, my Jessica has a message for women about hats. You know how women have the big dumb hat, and ladies do like to go about in a silly hat. And it's the answer that she has for them is, don't do anything weird. You don't need to do any one weird thing that makes the story about your one weird thing. Just keep it within the 40-yard lines of basic good taste. Have fun inside that space. Do whatever you want to do that you think sends the message that you want to send about yourself. But if you're looking to hire a male or become romantically involved in a male, and on his priority list is catching the eye and causing a stir with his apparel, check also to see if they eat children's breakfast cereal for breakfast.
So what did she think of Melania's hat getup?
Hat was good. Hat was good.
Liked it.
Yeah, I thought so. The hat was weird for sure. Spy versus spy. Some said Carmen Sandiego, but for outside especially, it was tasteful and appropriate. That's different than I'm going to a cidery with my girlfriends, so I'm wearing a 20-gallon hat that looks like it was a prospector's hat that I am now wearing around like a UFO has landed on my head.
Okay, Chris, this is old news. I'd actually read this article, but Chris wanted to talk about it.
I don't.
Had to click. Well, you pinged
I
it.
flagged it, but I don't want to talk about it.
All right.
The headline is "The Pure Liberation of a Personal Urination Device." This was sent to me by an Alert Wretches listener, I guess to ruin my evening as his had been ruined, because it was a news alert from the New York Times. Hey, we're the New York Times. We got news. Here's the news. What's the news? Well, here's a thing that gals can pee in. Oh, okay. Well, thanks for the news alert. Thank you for the news alert.
I had actually read this and it was so dumb that I didn't do anything with it. And it's basically about a woman who talked about how thrilled she was to go hiking and not have to squat to pee. That is the upshot.
Well, I gotta say, New York Times, you should be more judicious in your news alerting.
Yeah,
that's all. That's all I have to say. The thing so ladies can micturate while standing may be a wonderful product. No hate for its enthusiasts, but maybe not a news alert.
Chris, that brings us to our obsessions of the week. Where we break down the stories we can't get out of our heads. And I thought the best piece written this week was in the Wall Street Journal by a trio of reporters about Tulsi Gabbard's religious sect. And the headline is, as a rising political star, Gabbard paid to mask her sex tied to alleged scheme. Years before Tulsi Gabbard became Trump's pick to coordinate U.S. spy agencies, she tried to evade unwanted scrutiny. And I had heard about this. She's part of a Hindu sect. It's called the Science of Identity Foundation.
Sure.
And it is tied to a direct marketing firm that, people say is a pyramid scheme. The firm is called the QI Group. And while she was running for Congress, hired a DC-based PR group called the Potomac Group to try to hide her connection to this group. And I had long thought that, she has wacky views on foreign affairs. I actually had long thought this issue would be the most damaging to her because it's strange. So the Journal writes, the revelations shed further light on Gabbard's ties to the religious group, publicly described by some former followers as a cult. It has a living leader whom these people follow and worship. and to the Hong Kong-based QI, which has been a target of criminal and civil cases alleging fraud and racketeering in at least 7 countries. Gabbard's parents are followers of Butler, this guy Chris Butler, a former Hare Krishna disciple who founded Science of Identity Foundation in Hawaii in the 1970s. They raised Gabbard in the group, said former followers, who described Butler's demands of fealty. Some adherents mixed Butler's toenail clippings into their meals.
Gross.
2 former followers said as a sign of devotion. Others used his shoes as prayer totems.
That's not good. That's not what you want.
So the piece
That's not what you're looking for in a cult.
documents the accusations that this pyramid scheme connected to the group, or this business marketing thing connected to the group. It's unclear what exactly it is, but it notes that QI subsidiaries were banned in Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Rwanda in the 2000s after being declared pyramid schemes. And Indian prosecutors called the India franchise of QI's direct selling business, QNet, a Ponzi scheme in the guise of a direct selling business. And so her campaign brought on this PR firm to obscure her relationship to this group. So she obviously knows it's a liability, and really interesting story.
Well, the good news for you is I owe you a steak dinner, because we had been waiting to see whether Tom Cotton, a serious man, would endorse and vote for Tulsi Gabbard. Tom Cotton, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, would vote for Tulsi Gabbard to be the director of national intelligence. And this morning he said he would. And in the opening statement today, said a bunch of stuff about her that is not true. He today praised her sagacity and wisdom. And it's the wishful thinking. He's not doing something different than other people have done with other nominees. But I was genuinely surprised that he did. And so now I owe you a steak dinner.
I look forward to it.
But I like steak, and I like to hang out with you. So am I really losing this bet? No, I'm the real winner.
I look forward to it. Chris, what is your obsession?
That's about the ladies. And I guess we could have said that what did they call it? What the pure liberation of a personal urination device, maybe of a piece with this, which is, so I was doing some research for something else that I'm working on, and was wading through the gender breakdown of the demographics of the most trafficked news sites in these United States, male versus female. We know that overall the news audience is more male than female, and at a pretty steady, wide clip. And typical of these would be USA Today is 43% female, CNN 44% female, Fox News, these are among the 10 most trafficked news sites. Fox News, maybe not surprisingly, the lowest of them at 40% female. And that's pretty typical. It's pretty typical with a lot of local news, and that's how it is. What share of the New York Times audience is female? 54%.
Okay, I would have said 65.
54%, and the Washington Post is a couple points behind them, and just over half. So 54% for folks who do not pay attention to this stuff. 54% female is wild, because the huge problem that they have that we have in the news business, one of the huge problems is who's dropping out. Younger women. When we look at the data on who's dropping out of news, we have old dudes are consuming way too much news, way too much. They're getting too much news. Who's not getting enough or any news? Young women. The New York Times audience is young, and it's more female than male. And I thought, why? And we should play a clip here from Saturday Night Live. Made fun of the New York Times and their alerts. This is the do not destroy gang. So maybe we'll take a listen to a few seconds of that.
We could do a story about the firefighters working 20-hour shifts in California.
That could work. Let's blast that out. But for the next notification, I want something stickier.
We could do an update on the TikTok ban.
This is the New York Times, Donahue. Maybe take that to the Daily Mail.
Sir,
may have something.
Oh, the new guy. Callahan, what do you got?
It's just this viral hot honey chicken recipe will have your partner saying, "Yes, chef."
What the hell did you just say?
Sir, it's a recipe for Marry Me Chicken, and it's one pot, sir.
Jesus Christ, where have you been? Callahan, what else?
10 pickleball paddles to have your coworkers saying, "Okay, Topspin."
Yes! Yes, Callahan!
Well, I had a story about some migrants who were actually denied.
Boing! Callahan, save us.
Most comfortable coffee cup for hand feel? Hand feel?
I could kiss you, man. Can I kiss you?
Of course, boss.
So the Times definitely has figured out with its cooking app, which is great, and I use it. It has come to replace Bon Appetit and Epicurious and other apps that I used to use. New York Times cooking app is spectacular, useful. I love it. But their amount of non-news news and its games, particularly, has helped them win over this female audience. And maybe this has been the case for 20 years and I didn't know it, but I bet not. I bet that 20 years ago, the New York Times audience looked a lot more like the news industry generally, which is 60-40 or 55-45 male to female. And then it got me thinking about, what about the sports section? And if you know that your audience is more female than male, maybe outsourcing, maybe when the New York Times dumped its sports section, I cared and paid attention to it because they moved it over to the Atlantic or to the Athletic. And as I will recall at the time, you did not care. Is that right?
Right.
And maybe they knew what they were doing in the sense that if their electorate, if their audience is more female than male, maybe they figured this is something that we can afford to do without. Maybe we can shift those resources to other things. But I found the whole thing fascinating. And I got to say, all of the ways in which the New York Times caters to its female audience may not be seemly, see standing urination, and some of it may be a little cringy, but they're doing something that nobody else has figured out how to do, which is to get to parity or even beyond parity, male versus female audience.
Chris, that brings us to my favorite time of the week, which is reader mail. And we have a note from Zuba Jean in Tucson, Arizona.
Zuba Jean,
who said, I had to laugh when Eliana said she, quote, enjoyed the Lauren Sanchez coverage. Wasn't the story the literal lack of coverage? Yep.
Very good. Well done, Zuba Jean.
Okay. We also have a note from Matt Peterson, who's flagging an article that Richard Bear of Ohio.
Oh, I saw this.
Flagged. And Matt, however, is writing from North Platte, Nebraska. He says, hi, Eliana and Chris. I wanted to share this story out of Nebraska with you. Considering it combines two of Steyerwalt's favorite topics, obituaries and the McRib, I thought he would especially enjoy the article. I enjoy listening to your podcast each week. Thank you for continuing to provide some sanity to the news business. Keep up the good work. And the article is former UNL professor who helped create tech that led to McRib dies.
And what is his name? His name is Roger Mandingo, which is a great name to have if you are a meat scientist. I think that's fantastic.
And what was the tech he created?
Roger Mandingo was often mistakenly given credit for creating McDonald's McRib sandwich. I get credit, he said, for inventing the McRib fairly often, Mandingo told the Journal Star in a 2010 interview. I didn't invent the McRib sandwich. McDonald's did. In 1972, with funding from the National Pork Producers Council, Mandingo, a University of Nebraska at Lincoln professor, created a process that used salt to extract proteins from animal muscles, which created an emulsifier to hold pieces of meat together, allowing not only pork, but other types of meat to be formed into different shapes. McDonald's used that technology to create the McRib sandwich, which first hit the fast food giant's menu in 1982, and nowadays appears periodically as part of a promotion. So meat science, right? I'm just saying, meat science. It's out there and it's doing it. And for enthusiasts, for meat science enthusiasts, good news. My first newsletter for The Hill will debut. We're recording this on Thursday. Will debut tomorrow. And all I can tell you is it's got a meat theme to it. That's all. I'll just tell you it's meat adjacent. But and thank you very much, Matt Peterson. I am in your debt, sir.
Okay. Chris, that brings us to your favorite time of the week, where I am forced to say something nice, but let's hear it from you first.
No, you have to lead by example. You have to lead by example. Those are the rules.
You lead by example.
Oh, I do?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll see. I've forgotten the rules. Forbes took Jim Justice, former governor, freshly minted senator from West Virginia, to the woodshed. And Jim Justice, who in West Virginia has had for all of the years of his governorship, frustrated the local press by the opacity of his financial disclosures and was always financially in trouble and in debt. And the hotel that he owns, the Greenbrier, is always in trouble. Everything's in trouble. People are filing liens, doing all this stuff. And the local press couldn't quite break through to get it. Well, welcome to Washington, Senator Justice, because Forbes just did an autopsy of his terrible financial state. And basically it says he used to be a billionaire. Now he's the poorest member of the United States Senate. So it was the kind of in-depth forensic reporting. Forbes has a weird passion to be and I guess I understand its appeal, to be the chronicler of wealth, right? Donald Trump famously sued them because he said that they had underestimated his wealth. He lost or dropped the case or whatever. This is their thing. And they would not be defied by Jim Justice, and they got their man.
Okay, Chris, my favorite item was, we're circling back to the New York Times coverage from Paris, was this incredible piece on this is what they say you need to know from Paris. The lumber sexual returns.
Oh, boy.
With a Filson partnership, Junya Watanabe takes us on a time warp back to the hipstery 2000s, plaid, checks, and all. So they say this is the look. If you click through to the article, it's a dude with a big beard wearing a plaid shirt. So
where are you on this question?
I'm a no.
You're no on lumber sexuality?
Yeah, no. It says it was the models in their husky Filson jackets, the buffalo checks, the tan cloth bags, the Mondo hiking boots, and the dark wash cuffed jeans. But most of all, it was the feathered out mountain man beards.
Oh.
I could practically smell the beard oil. I might as well have been getting my hair cut at an $80 barbershop on Driggs Avenue while listening to Arcade Fire and drinking an IPA.
Yes.
The lumber sexual, folks, is back. At least in Mr. Watanabe's hands. The designer, part of the Comme des Garçons extended universe, is a singular force. Thus far in Paris, he is the only designer plumbing our recent hipstery past for inspiration.
Amazing.
Wow. So that's what you need to know from Paris. Good thing for all of you who didn't buy tickets to watch the shows in person. You saved a lot of money. That is all the time we have for the news about the news. If you have a story you want us to talk about, email us at wretches@nebulouspodcasts.com. That's wretches@nebulouspodcasts.com, and sign up for our newsletter at nebulouspodcasts.com. This has been Ink-Stained Wretches from Nebulous Media, produced by Colin Chicola. Find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Wretches.